from the CyberHub bunker and studio, you're tuning in to the CyberHub Podcast. And now for your host and CISO, James Azar.
What is up, security gang? Welcome to another episode of the CyberHub Podcast. It's May 25th, 2022. Just a few days shy of a long but important and pivotal weekend in American history. Memorial Weekend is a weekend where we remember the brave men and women who made and paid the ultimate sacrifice for the defense of this nation. We also take time to thank those families that have made the ultimate sacrifice for what they've had to endure over the years since losing their loved one. So, keeping that in mind, Memorial Weekend, really a fundamental a weekend in American history. And it's great that people go out and enjoy the freedoms that have been fought for and are there, but also don't forget to thank a veteran or a Gold Star family for their service, for their sacrifice as well, because they're the ones that this weekend won't be barbecuing, won't be out celebrating. This will be a very, very difficult weekend. If you have friends that are veterans who've been deployed, who've lost friends in battle, this is a great weekend to spend time with them, hear them out, and give them some mental health support as well. That's also just as critical, folks. So we're going to get into the show. Before we do that, though, my traditional cup of coffee. Now, one other thing is, if you're interested in being part of the practitioner brief and sponsoring it, we are accepting sponsors at this time. You can get more information on our website, cyberhubpodcast.com. Go there, submit a form. Someone from our team will contact you and get you all the information you need. Now, for my double espresso, right here in front of you. Coffee cup cheers, folks. Busy show today. Let's get right into it. I've got a lot of stories. We're going to shift through and we're going to really move through these patches. So Trend Micro has actually patched the vulnerability that's been exploited by the Chinese spies. The threat actors' activities were analyzed by endpoint security firm SentinelOne, which tracked the group as Motion Dragon. Some overlaps with some of the other group tracks as Red Foxtrot and Nomad Panda. Now, in a recent advisory, Trend Micro said that its only Trend Micro consumer product is affected. The fix was deployed through the company's active update system on May 19th. And so that is done. If you're using Trend Micro and you're using that product, get it patched. If you're using Zoom, you may want to pay attention to this one. A new Zoom flaw could let attackers hack victims just by sending them a message. The popular video conferencing service Zoom has resolved as many as 4 security vulnerabilities, which could be exploited to compromise another user over chat by sending specially crafted extensible messaging and presence protocol XMPP messages and execute malicious code. They're tracked to CVE 22 22784 22787. The issues range from 5.9 to 8.1 on the CVSS severity scale. Ivan Fratrick of Google's Project Zero has been credited with discovering and reporting the flaws. Now, those have all been updated by Zoom, so make sure your Zoom versions are updated so that they're not susceptible to this as well. Chrome 102 is now out in the weekly Chrome patch. It seems like it. 32 vulnerabilities have been taken care of. So the stable channel release of Chrome 102 patches 32 vulnerabilities, including a critical flaw reported by an anonymous researcher. The critical security hole track, the CV 2022-1853, has been described as a free use after free bug affecting indexed database. Google learned about it on May 12th, and it has yet to determine the bug bounty for this specific vulnerability. So make sure your Chrome browsers are updated as well. This is a great story. It's been forwarded to me by several people I know. Coming from the Microsoft Security Response Center, threat actors are actually gaining access to users' accounts online by leveraging a new technique that involves pre-hijacking an account before it's actually registered by the victim. So the account pre-hijacking was analyzed by Avinash Suduhadinen and Andrew Pavard of the Microsoft Security Response Center. Microsoft funded the project through a grant and offered $75,000 for proposals on improving the security of its identity solution. Compromised accounts are involved in many attacks. It's really the vector of compromise in so many different ways, shapes, or form. This could also work if the attacker registers an account using a federated identity while the victim creates an account on the same website using the classic registration process. Think of going to a bank, think of using this on Amazon, Netflix, anywhere really, but most people reuse their credentials. So what they're ideally trying to do is hijack one account and from there hijack multiple accounts. And you can see how this works. There's actually a great diagram of this. So something to definitely keep in mind of how you start to defend your organization from stuff like this. Now in your Azure AD, you've got the controls in place, but outside of your environment, are people reusing their company email? Could that lead to internal compromise? It's something that's really worth going through and auditing at this time. Researchers find a new malware new malware attacks that are targeting Russian government entities. An unknown APT group has been linked to a series of spear phishing attacks targeting Russian government entities since the onset of the Russia-Ukraine war in late February of this year. The campaigns are designed to implement a remote access Trojan that can be used to surveil the computers it infects and run commands on them remotely, according to Malwarebytes. The cybersecurity company attributed the attacks with low confidence to a Chinese hacking group, citing infrastructure overlaps between the RAT and the Sakala RAT malware used by threat actor known as Deep Panda. The attack chains, while leveraging different lures over the course of the 2 months, all employed the same malware, barring small differences in the source code. A second early March attack wave primarily targeted the state-controlled RTTV and involved the use of rogue software fix for the Log4Shell vulnerability that made headlines last year. So we're seeing China on the move against Russia, continues to do so, showing you that their alliance really isn't what it seems. They're saying the enemy of my enemy is my friend. And so they're trying to create this friendship, but really if we just practiced a little bit more control foreign policy wise, we might be able to get the Russians to back the US and Western nations against China and the evils that the Chinese government perpetrates across the globe. And we'll talk about that here in just a moment. US, Australia, India, and Japan both announced a cybersecurity initiative on software and supply chain. President Joe Biden, who is making his first trip across Asia as president, met in Tokyo with newly elected Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese, Prime Minister Narendra Modi of India, and Prime Minister Fumio Kishida of Japan to discuss a range of issues, one of which was cybersecurity. In a statement released after the meeting, the leaders committed to improving the collective cybersecurity of critical infrastructure by sharing threat information and identifying potential risks in the supply chain for digitally enabled products and services. That's really important. But information and threat sharing has been happening between these countries for ages now. This is nothing new. It's just, kind of fluff. The question is, what's really going to come out of this? Could there really be some significant improvements to how we look at supply chains, especially since most supply chains rely on China? So how do you kind of address that as well? And with China circling Taiwan and rumors of China seeking to invade Taiwan at the moment, and Taiwan producing most of the semiconductors around the world, you could see this being more than just we're all going to make this a one plan, beefing up cyber protection, more of a, all right, this is, I see this as more of being just, just virtue signaling per se. We're doing something about it, but they're really not. And finally, we'll go to our final story, China. So one of the reasons I love cyber is because we do a lot of good. There's a lot of good to be done here. Well, over the last several weeks and since the beginning of this year, there's been thousands of detained Uyghur Muslims. There's over 1 million detained Uyghur Muslims in China, in the province of Xinjiang, in Western China, where they're enforced labor and the women are having, they're not able to get pregnant. They're going through brainwashing camps. It's difficult to explain. Well, a hacker was able to get access to the police records, and now all of that has leaked online. It's not getting the credit it should, but it damn well should. this is happening right now in China in 2022, where we're watching a Nazi Germany type of camps being set up with the minority being taken there. So the trove of hacked Chinese police photographs and documents shedding lights on the human toll of Beijing's treatment of its Uyghur minority in Xinjiang has been published by the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights, Michelle Bachelet, as she visited cities in the region. The data drove, referred to as the Xinjiang Police Files and published by a consortium of media, including the BBC, goes back to 2018 and was passed on by good doer hackers to Dr. Adrian Zenz, a US-based scholar and activist who shared it with the international media earlier this year. It includes thousands of photographs of detained people and details of a shoot-to-kill policy for people who try to escape these camps. The ruling Communist Party is accused of detaining more than 1 million Uyghurs, although that number is supposed to be very, very underrated. In fact, this could be 2, 3, or even 5 million people. There's not a real known number. Chinese authorities have been waging a campaign of forced labor, coerced sterilization, and the destruction of Uyghur cultural heritage in Xinjiang. Chinese officials and diplomats call such allegations lies of the century, but we all know that to be untrue. So you can see that, and this is where the do-gooders in our industry do well. You should definitely take a look at this story. It doesn't impact you per se from a cybersecurity perspective in your organization, but it definitely shows you just how far and how important some of the work we do as security researchers to expose the mistreatment of others and the human rights violations there is definitely something significant. We talk about the NSO group and Pegasus and the spying that goes on there. Well, these are real people, families that are torn apart, forced sterilization, forced labor. Some products that we buy from China come from Xinjiang, and even though there are sanctions, you can't really enforce those sanctions if the product is shipped from Xinjiang to Guangzhou and then from Guangzhou shipped abroad. You wouldn't know unless someone in the supply chain said it. So definitely something to keep in mind here, folks. That's it for our show today. We'll be back with a lot more tomorrow to wrap up this week before the holiday, before Memorial Weekend. So thank you all for being here. Really appreciate your time. Make sure you're patching your environments, and most importantly, share this story about the Uyghur Muslims. I'm sure a lot of people are not hearing about this, don't understand why China is the greatest threat to the world at the moment. Have a great rest of your day and stay cyber safe.
We love feedback, so make sure to connect with us on social media and subscribe to our podcast on your favorite podcast listening platform.